What if an entire city was gripped by an invisible force, compelling its people to dance until they collapsed? In the sweltering summer of 1518, the city of Strasbourg, nestled within the Holy Roman Empire, became the stage for one of history's most bewildering medical mysteries. It began with a single woman, Frau Trophia, who stepped into the street and began to dance. There was no music, no celebration, just a silent, feverish, and unrelenting movement. Within a week, dozens had joined her, their bodies twisting and jerking in a macabre, involuntary ballet. Within a month, the number swelled to 400. Physicians were baffled, priests saw the work of saints or demons, and the city council's bizarre prescription, more dancing only, fanned the flames of the phenomenon. Was this a genuine, unknown disease? A case of mass psychogenic illness, fueled by famine and superstition? Or was it something else entirely? A strange footnote in the annals of human behavior that defies modern explanation. We will unravel the bizarre case of the dancing plague, a time when a city lost its rhythm and danced on the very edge of reason. Strasbourg, July 1518, a city gasping for air. The tendrils of famine and the shadow of the sweating sickness had only just receded, leaving a populace brittle with anxiety. It is on this fragile stage that a woman known as Frau Trophia makes her entrance. One sweltering day, she steps out of her home and begins to dance. There is no music, no celebration. Only the rhythmic, unsettling scuff of her shoes on the dusty cobblestone. Her body moves with a strange, convulsive energy, her arms flailing, her expression a blank mask of compulsion. Her husband pleads, then scolds, then tries to restrain her, but she is lost to him, a puppet pulled by invisible strings. For 6 agonizing days, she dances. She dances until her feet are raw and her body is screaming for rest. But the impulse will not cease. A small crowd of neighbors gathers, their initial curiosity curdling into a mixture of fear and bewilderment. They watch the solo performance, a silent, terrifying prelude to a citywide madness. The sun beats down, a merciless witness to the beginning of the bizarre plague, a dance that would soon claim hundreds more in its unstoppable, silent rhythm. The solitary dance of Frau Trophia was merely the opening note. Within a week, her strange affliction proved to be violently contagious, not by germ but by sight. The spectacle became a trigger. One by one, then in clusters, others joined her. The solo became a horrifying chorus. By the end of the week, more than 30 people were caught in the same relentless grip, their bodies twisting and jerking through the city streets and squares. Men and women, artisans and laborers, were swept up in the bizarre choreography. The initial public fascination soared into palpable alarm. This was no festive revelry. Their faces were masks of torment, their eyes wide with a terror they could not articulate. The group moved like a single, tormented organism, a chaotic procession without a leader, destination, or purpose, disrupting market days and bringing the city's commerce to a halt. The city magistrates, watching from the windows of the guild halls, were utterly baffled. Their orderly world had been invaded by a creeping chaos, a silent, rhythmic rebellion of the body that defied all logic and authority. And it was growing stronger with every passing hour. As the number of dancers swelled past 100, panic forced the city's leaders to act. In a dark, wood-paneled chamber, the city's most powerful men convened, the magistrates of the council, the wealthy heads of the guilds, and the most respected physicians. They gathered to diagnose the impossible. Supernatural explanations, whispers of divine punishment or demonic possession, were quickly dismissed as unbefitting of enlightened men. Instead, they turned to the wisdom of the ancients, to the established medical doctrines of Galen. After solemn deliberation, they reached a consensus. This was not a curse, but a natural malady, an ailment of hot blood. They theorized that an overheated humoral imbalance was forcing the victims' bodies into these frantic motions. The cure, therefore, was not rest, which they feared would allow the fever to fester. The cure was more dancing. They decreed that the afflicted must be encouraged to dance continuously day and night until the fever burned itself out and they collapsed from exhaustion, their bodies purged of the disease. It was a fatal miscalculation, a diagnosis born of arrogance and ancient theory, about to be unleashed upon their suffering citizens. The council's bizarre prescription was enacted with chilling efficiency. This was no longer a spontaneous outbreak. It was a state-sanctioned spectacle. City workers were ordered to clear 2 of the largest public spaces, the grain market and the horse market. Carpenters were hired, and under the hot summer sun, they hastily constructed large wooden stages. The city was building a theater for a plague. To ensure the cure was properly administered, the authorities went a step further. They hired professional musicians. Dozens of fiddlers, drummers, and pipers were paid to provide a relentless, upbeat soundtrack for the unfolding tragedy. The goal was to use the rhythm to keep the dancers moving, to help them dance the fever away. The afflicted, many already on the brink of collapse, were herded by guards from the narrow streets onto these public stages. The scene was surreal. Exhausted, tormented people forced to continue their frantic movements to the sound of cheerful music, surrounded by a growing audience of horrified onlookers. The city, in its attempt to impose order, had created a public stage for mass calamity, a decision that would have devastating consequences. The cure proved more lethal than the disease. The combination of non-stop physical exertion under the relentless summer heat was a catastrophe. On the public stages, the dancers began to fall. Heart attacks, strokes, and sheer exhaustion claimed victim after victim. The cheerful music of the hired pipers now seemed like a grotesque funeral dirge. The daily death toll, estimated by some accounts to be as high as 15 per day, could no longer be ignored. Public horror replaced morbid curiosity. The physician's hot blood theory was discredited, abandoned as the bodies piled up. In the vacuum of science, superstition rushed back in. The affliction was re-diagnosed by the populace not as a sickness of the body, but of the soul. This was a curse, they whispered, a divine wrath brought down upon them by Saint Vetus, a saint known to inflict plagues of compulsive dancing upon sinners. Desperate, the city council reversed their course entirely. They tore down the stages, banned all public music, and turned from medicine to piety. The remaining dancers were to be led on a court's pilgrimage to the shrine of Saint Vetus, to beg for forgiveness and a spiritual cure. As August bled into September, an eerie quiet descended upon Strasbourg. The relentless music, once ordered by the authorities as a misguided cure, finally ceased. The stages built in the guild halls and market squares stood empty, silent monuments to a disastrous intervention. One by one, the dancers faltered. Their movements, once frenetic and uncontrollable, slowed to weary stumbles before they collapsed from sheer exhaustion, dehydration, and heart failure. The streets, which for weeks had been a theater of ceaseless motion, were now littered with the still forms of the afflicted. Families cautiously emerged, searching for loved ones among the fallen, their faces etched with a mixture of terror and relief. The plague had not been vanquished by prayer or performance. It had simply burned itself out, leaving a trail of broken bodies and shattered psyches. The city took a collective, ragged breath, but the silence was not peaceful. It was heavy, filled with the unspoken question that haunted every survivor. What had just happened to them, and could it happen again? The physical ordeal was over, but the psychological haunting was only just beginning. In the wake of the profound silence, the desperate search for answers began. 16th-century chroniclers, struggling to comprehend the bizarre events, attributed the plague to supernatural causes, divine punishment, or the work of a vengeful saint. Others proposed a naturalistic, if flawed, explanation of hot blood and imbalance of bodily humors. For centuries, these remained the dominant theories. Modern science, however, offers more grounded hypotheses. One compelling theory is ergotism, poisoning from a claviceps purpurea fungus that grows on damp rye, which can cause severe muscle spasms and hallucinations. Another, more widely accepted explanation is mass psychogenic illness. Strasbourg in 1518 was a city under immense pressure, suffering from famine, disease, and extreme poverty. This widespread social and psychological distress may have created a perfect storm, where the frantic dance of one woman, Frau Trophia, became a contagious psychological release valve for an entire community's pent-up anxiety. The dancing plague becomes less a medical anomaly and more a stark illustration of the human mind's profound fragility under duress.